So folks who are thinking about possible scenarios where there's breakdown of the system, they've seen unrest, in Greece or in other places. They've seen private pension accounts being seized, whether it's in Cyprus or Poland, or they've seen the partial collapse of the ruble in Russia. They're not necessarily eased at thinking that there's lower risk by just moving their precious metals farther out into a different jurisdiction, unless that's a specifically stable area where there may be specific privacy protections. I mean, hasn't there been, since the Patriot Act and so on, isn't there been a great loss of ability to have your personal financial arrangements, even if it's overseas, to be private? And aren't those other jurisdictions subject to having to cooperate with the U.S. government, that sort of thing?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I don't think anyone can turn around and claim we can store your gold and silver completely beyond the control of your government. The American government has shown a huge keenness to extract taxes from American citizens wherever they live. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a department of the IRS on the moon, quite frankly. So that undoubtedly is true. But what we try and do is we try and sort of give people the option of storing their gold and silver in different locations. So I mean we've got vaulting arrangements in London, Canada. We've got vaulting arrangements in Zurich as well, and Hong Kong, and also Singapore. Now, Singapore is a pretty independent state. I'm not saying that the American government can't lean on them and try and stop them doing business and force them to do this, that, and the other thing. But so far, I would say that the Singaporeans have very strongly resisted the sort of interference you're talking about. But there's no guarantee that that won't change. And here again, the other aspect of it is information. I think that the U.S. tax authorities or the government would need the information as to know where their citizens' assets are, or rather their nationals' assets are, that is something again which you cannot eventually prevent. I mean, we've seen that Swiss private bankers have been arrested as soon as they've gone into, as soon as they've sort of arrived in New York airport, and they get arrested and they get lent on, and eventually the bank has to sort of cough up the information. So. Your government are a pretty nasty lot when they want something, and we all know that. And I would not advocate, and I would certainly not want to be perceived as advocating, storage of metals abroad is a means of breaking the law. Now, I wouldn't say that at all, but all I would say is that it allows you to retain control over your own property within the law. That's the important thing. Now, I can see a situation potentially arising where my gold and silver, which I store through gold money, or most of it anyway, if the British government started leaning on me, then I would just fly out of the country, and then they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So there are ways in which you can get around this problem. But the one thing we've got to be absolutely clear is that we're not talking about working outside the law. We're talking about retaining control of our assets legally, and that's the important thing.